Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We are part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, former Vanderbilt basketball great Will Perdue. Will is fairly plugged into the football program at Vanderbilt. And so today's podcast is mostly going to deal with the opening game against Hawaii and the culture surrounding the football program. There will be some basketball-specific questions in the mailbag at the end, so stay tuned to that. Anyway, here is our interview with Will Perdue. Will Perdue joins me, as he does on a fairly regular basis, or at least I think that's going to be the case going forward. We are talking here on a Tuesday morning. It is opening week of the football season for Vanderbilt, not so much for the rest of the country. But Will, I know there's been a lot of anticipation for the opening game. It's a strange scenario with a game kicking off at 9:30 Central. So just an odd setting to begin the season, but the season is beginning, and I know a lot of people have looked forward to that, including me and you.
Well, yes, you're exactly right. You know, the interesting thing is as we approach Saturday, I will continue to battle internally about what it is that I'm looking forward to the most on Saturday. I mean, the obvious is, can they win the game? I think that's first and foremost. That's the most. Well, that's the first question. I don't know if that's the most important question, quite honestly. And some people that are listening to this podcast may be taken back by that. But you know, the expectations are. And if you go by what's being said at Vegas, now listen, I understand Vegas isn't telling you that Vanderbilt's necessarily going to win the game, but they are favored by 7.5, if I remember correctly. So it's not like it's only a 3-point spread. So I would say that, you know, they're the odds-on favorite. But they're still, you know, this is somewhat that makes this so intriguing, because the only thing we can go on is last year at 2-10. No SEC wins. Okay. And regardless of what you think about last season, we need to try to focus and the present and the future. So if there was a better opponent than Hawaii, I don't like the fact that they had to go to Hawaii. I think that when it's all said and done, the players are going to enjoy themselves. And as I've been, you know, following them on social media, they've already done, you know, some really good things over there, you know, as far as community service. I mean, they're not just over there to play football, and I like the fact that Clark has them involved into the community and trying to, you know, maybe win over a few fans. But I think, and I mean, I know this answer is going to take a few minutes, and I appreciate your patience, Chris, but you know, I'll share with our listeners, you know, right out of the gate. There's 3 things that I'm going to be looking for in this game. Well, 4. One is I hope and anticipate them winning this game. Okay? But if they don't, I would like to have some questions answered. And there's some terminology that I'm going to share with our listeners that, you know, and I was fortunate enough to go over there, you know, a couple weeks ago and sit in on the team meetings, the coaches meetings, things of that nature. I don't think I'm, you know, letting out any, you know, state secrets here, but, you know, and this is something that I'm sure every football team looks to do, but this is something that they're really pressing hard, and they remind and they talk about at the beginning of every day. You know, the first term that Clark came up with, and part of the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I loved it. I wrote it down, and I'm going to use this when I talk to younger kids and teams, you know, about approaches and you know, mental aspects and toughness as far as how a team thinks and acts. But, they're talking about being able to play as a collective force. And just, I'm not demeaning anybody, but just to use the term collective means, acting as a group. And I think that we can honestly agree that, in the past, this team hasn't always played as a group. And that's been unfortunate, but Clark's been pressing that, offense, defense, special teams. Can they play as a collective force, meaning everybody's on the same page, everybody's buying in, and when you watch them, hey, maybe they're not winning, but I'm thinking of this throughout the whole season, but yes, they're playing as a collective force and they're playing to the best of their ability. I think we all can agree as well that they're going to play some games that they can play really well and still lose because they're playing opponents that are just better than them, deeper than them, have more talent than them. But then that's where, you also comes the second term, dictate terms, meaning that you're the team that dictates how the game's going to be played. So when you're playing Alabama and these other SEC teams, if you're going to lose the game, you're not going to roll over. And I'm not saying that Vanderbilt's rolled over in the past, but you're going to make them earn it. So when that opponent walks off the field, their respect level has gone way up. They're looking at Clark Lee, they're looking at the players, and they're thinking, hey, this team, I'm not talking about opposing coaches, I'm talking about opposing players. This team, these players, they're going in the right direction. This team's played harder and tougher than any Vanderbilt team I've ever played. The mentality that they have, the toughness that they have is impressive. And then these opponents are walking off the field, they're like, hey, we won today, but this team's getting better. And as they continue to get better talent, they're going to be tougher to deal with. And you want that in the back of opponents' minds. And the last thing is, how does this team handle adversity? What if they don't get off to a great start, against Hawaii? Can they regroup? Can they slowly chip away and come back and win the game? This isn't something that we've seen out of this team in a couple of years. They get down early. Mentally, they're now crushed. They can't get back on track, and things just get worse. So I think those are three things that all fans, when they're watching that Hawaii game and the Elon game and the Wake Forest game, think about collective force, think about dictate terms, think about handle adversity, and see if they're making improvement every week.
Will, it's been interesting being that it's opening week, and you see in the offseason there's a lot of optimism and, hey, this guy's done well in spring and fall camp and all those things, and people get excited and they can anticipate improvement and all those things. And then you get to game week and you get the message board posts that I see, you get the phone calls and the text messages where people are remembering the Temple opener in 2014 and the SMU game in 90 or 91 or whatever year that was, and just some of the disasters that have beset Vanderbilt football in the past, and the doubt creeps in and all that. It's an interesting psychological study, but I do like the way that Clark Lee has prepared them in the ways that you speak of, because I think that having a more aggressive mentality and dictating things rather than sitting back and waiting and maybe waiting for bad things to happen has often been the case. It seems to me that maybe the mindset there lends itself to winning games a little bit more. Now, look, they may lose to Hawaii and all that goes out the window, but it's just been interesting to hear you talk about the approach that the staff has had, combined with all the messages where the doubt has crept in with the fan base and for former players who just seen disaster time and time and time again. And frankly, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't think you called it a must win. I almost do, because I think that if they lose this game, then all the negative narratives come back. The talk of progress, I'm not going to say completely gets halted, but you put a big dent in that. And I just think this is a game that they really need to win to start putting some of that past that drags them down behind them.
No, I agree with that 100%, Chris. I mean, I really do. I mean, that's, as I said, first and foremost, I want to see them win this game. And that's what was kind of referring to as far as, the internal battle that I'm having as we approach Saturday is this a must win? I mean, I think right now I'm kind of sitting on the fence, with, must win or play well. I think when you start, as you said, now we can really start thinking about Hawaii. Now, you have, I think it's the coach that's head of player development, has made a statement that Vanderbilt has no idea what they're getting themselves into, for this game on Saturday. And, there's some truth to that, because if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's Hawaii has 53 new players.
Yeah.
And that's just unheard of. So how do you watch game film? I mean, I know there's a certain offense that you think they're going to run and a certain scheme they're going to use on defense, but I mean, who knows? This is going to be, but that's the other thing, Chris, is we're not just talking about testing the toughness of the players because of the great unknown of this Hawaii team, with so many new players. You're also testing the knowledge and the flexibility and the ability to pivot in the middle of a game on the coaches. We can't just sit here and say, all right, the players have to do this and that and have to act a certain way and play a certain way. That's a true statement, but also, this is on the coaches as well. It's when you say collective force, you're not just talking about the players, you're also talking about the coaches. And what I mean by that is, and I think this has happened, that do the players that have bought in at the moment and believe, but do they also feel like as they now are reiterating the game plan and scripting the first 10 plays and, going over the defensive scheme and constantly doing the scouting report to the players, at the end of every night when they have that last meeting before they go to their hotel rooms, fully believe that they're being put in their best position to win, regardless of talent. And me personally, having an opportunity to kind of cross paths with some of these guys and talk to them at the moment, I think they do believe that. So that's where there's so many unanswered questions regarding this game. That's why, I think this game is going to be a game. And I think when you talk about must win, there are certain aspects from a fan standpoint that I think I agree with you in the sense that it is a must win. Because those that are sitting on the fence of, do I even invest my time with this team this year? Are they going to be worthy? Are they just going to be frustrating again? Am I going to get mad? Am I going to throw things at the TV? Those are the ones that I think are going to be like, hey, if they don't win this game, I'm out. I'm done. I'll find more productive things to do with my time. But if they do win, now that they're in, they'll be watching the next week. And I think for some of those fans, it's going to be a week-by-week saga, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be emotional. I told you I watched every game last year except for one or two of them that were on ESPN Plus. I couldn't get them. And I plan on doing the same this year. But I've also, been very impressed with what I've not only learned from Clark, but just the time I've had, with the other coaches. But I do have expectations, and I expect those expectations to be met, not only by the coaches, but by the players. And, can they check those boxes of collective force, dictate terms, and handle adversity? And if you want to talk about, as you just said, those teams of the past, I just don't think they've handled adversity very well. I don't think that they've been mentally tough. And, I think some of that has been reflective of the staff and the lack of belief in the staff. But I don't think that that's where they are in this situation. I think they have changed the culture. I think they have changed the belief. And I think a lot of that has to do with, as you've seen, and we'll agree, their recruiting, they've done an excellent job with and gotten a lot of commitments from players that in the past would have no interest of coming to Vanderbilt. So I think that there's more than just the current rosters buying in. I think that you have recruits and players that are buying in and want to be a part of this.
I think that you've hit on several things that I wanted to comment on as sidebars. One is fan engagement and belief. I think that could be a whole hour-long podcast, because I think there are topics underneath that with ticketing and season ticketing that really, really need to be addressed, that Vanderbilt's not doing a good job of addressing. But I spoke yesterday at a Rotary Club type thing that I do maybe once a year, and it's composed mostly of older Vanderbilt fans and even some players. And I kind of got asked a lot of questions, and it was just this, I don't know, cautious, almost disengaged, looking at it from a long way away. And these are people that used to be, decent donors, like I said, played there. That the engagement. I talked to a former player yesterday who got invited to practice and told me, he said, look, I was waiting to see if I could get other teammates to go with me. That was sort of the thing. I was going to maybe use that as an opportunity to hang out with other players. Well, he asked 3 other people, nobody wanted to go. So he didn't go. And I hope I'm not telling a story out of turn, but that's just kind of where this fan base is. And, I had a lot of questions about facilities. I think people still doubt they're going to do what they said they're going to do. I think they will. I'm not endorsing that statement necessarily, but that's where people are. And I think if you're going to get fans who have been big stakeholders involved again, I think this is a must-win unless you steal one somewhere else later in the season. And I think certainly for belief in players and everything too. But I just think it's been such a fascinating week, and just the mentality of the people who have followed this program. But because it's just, again, it's at that stage where all that doubt has crept in. And at some point, Charlie Brown's got to kick the football.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Charlie Brown, because I was just getting ready to use that as an analogy, and I'm part of that. I'll tell people, I'm trying to be very transparent. I think the Vanderbilt, and not just necessarily the football fan, but the Vanderbilt fan as a whole, and we'll start with football, is Charlie Brown. And most of these fans feel like, whether they look at Lucy as the athletic department, whether they look at Lucy as the school, whether they look at Lucy as the football team, whatever it may be, you keep asking yourself, but that's also the hard part, the perseverance, the belief that at some point Lucy's not going to pull the football away, and at some point Charlie's going to kick it, and he's going to make the field goal. And the one thing I do know for a fact is Clark knows this. He's very aware. He talks about it with his team. He addresses it front and center. He talks about the importance of what these guys are trying to establish, not just win football games, but win back the fans. All right? And that's where, and this is the difficult part, because you're not trying to alienate alumni, former players. They want as many former players back in the fold as possible. But what they're not doing, and what they're not trying to do, is bring back those memories of the past. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, no doubt, and that's a delicate balance. And you've seen the school, and I think it's gone too far. I think it is, quote unquote, fixed the things that didn't need fixing, like the logo or Steve Willard, and not fixed a lot of the things that still very much need fixing, and needed fixing 2 years and 5 years and 10 years ago. But there is
that.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Did you see that the video by that? What do they call themselves? The SEC something, where they're at the airport
Yes. SEC shorts, those are so good.
Yep, to where they were boarding the plane, and they said, those that need a little extra time. And they show, now listen, I know the athletic department in the school didn't like that, but the guy's got a head bandage on, and he's got one crutch, and he's hopping up, and he goes, I got a V on my chest that looks like Villanova. And
yes,
I had to laugh, man. That's pretty funny. But
they don't take nearly as many shots at Vanderbilt as they could.
Oh, well, who was it they said that when somebody said, hey, we're ready to board, and they said, excuse me, we haven't called the invitation for the Music City Bowl yet. Back up.
Right.
I forgot what.
I want to say South Carolina, perhaps, or
yeah. Yeah, but they're taking pot shots at everybody, so it's kind of funny. I mean, the only one that they really weren't taking a pot shot at was Georgia when they said national champions can now board, and they show that one guy run up and roll out the red carpet, and this dude comes in with all the swagger.
And he's got a throne on his head. I mean, not a throne, a crown on his head. It was very funny.
So that was good. But honestly, what? And I'm not trying to aggravate the athletic department. I just think that that's how current fans, other schools, there are those that have disowned themselves from Vanderbilt altogether, kind of look at things. And that's some of the things that, Clark, he knew this going in. He's been assigned, not because he's raised his hand and said, hey, that's what I'm going to do, but that's just come with a job. And the athletic department, and let me touch on this briefly, I think needs to do a better job. And I think they are trying, but, I think unfortunately they've made a couple wrong turns, and maybe that's because they're stubborn. But I do know that, the hire of Tommy McClellan has been very good. I don't necessarily agree with, what they've done with the ticket pricing and things like that. I understand how they're thinking, but I'm also one of those fans that is taking a wait and see attitude. Now, I've invested myself into this football program because I believe in Clark Lee. I believe in what he's attempting to do. And, I'm also investing myself in this football program because I understand, even as a former basketball player, about a sport that's had much more success at Vanderbilt than football has. But regardless of that, I understand that football drives the bus, not only for that athletic department, but for the university. And if they want to continue to be a part of the SEC, and if they want to continue to be able to be competitive, which they haven't been for a couple years in the SEC, things have to change, and not just on the field, but also at McGugin. And I think Candace is attempting to do that. I think it's a slow go. We would all like to see it, transpire a lot quicker. But, I think they're slowly figuring it out. But there's really, you could say, oh, look what Alabama's done, and look what Georgia's done. We can't use that blueprint. We just can't. We have to do it differently. So we're kind of writing the manual as we go. But I think we would all like to see that happen a lot quicker than it is at the moment.
Well, one thing Clark did that I thought was smart was open all the practices, which I don't know that anybody in Power 5 does anything close to what they do. There may be a school somewhere, but you do open yourself to some risk of other people knowing a little bit more about what you're doing, but I think he knows they really need all the coverage and enthusiasm they can get. So I was really grateful for that because I've got a really good handle on, I think, their personnel and what they're trying to do. And ordinarily under Derek Mason and what he had done, we just weren't getting much of that at all, which I think part of that was Derek's own insecurity. And I don't think that he had a clue as to what to do and where to go. And sometimes people tend to try to hide those things, which seemed like the case in his case. But I know that we were very welcome. He wants former players there a lot, and that's one thing that they're trying to do. It's just they're going to have to win some games and help themselves out a little bit before I think people are willing to bite. But I wanted to hit another thing, and then you and I have got about 25 minutes left, and we've got a bunch of questions
let me just
to answer.
Let me just finish this thought with one thing. I think that unfortunately, and this is kind of what happens when you don't win games, you become very sensitive. You unfortunately catch yourself or somebody on your staff or somebody within media relations, reading all the articles, perusing the internet, talking about all the negativity, and you get caught up in that. And I think because, what Clark dealt with when he was there as a walk-on, he knows. I mean, there's nobody that knows any better than he does. But also the things that he learned at Notre Dame, I think have helped him prepare for this job. And, unless he changes dramatically as a person, I don't think you're going to see, I don't want to say he's not sensitive, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to come out one day and complain about all the negativity and how dare you. And, I don't think he's even going to approach that. That's not something that he feels he needs to even address, because he's got other things to worry about. So I think that that's also where you talk about changing the culture and having the right man at the helm. I know people still, we can mention this again, talk about how can he make these statements he's making at SEC media days? Is this dude on crack? What is he talking about? I just think that's who he is. That's what he thinks he can accomplish. And he's going to do everything within his power to do that. And he will continue. He kind of reminds me of the guy, and you can say it's kind of like the Monty Python skit, right? Where, the guy is supposedly protecting the bridge, but he has no weapons, and then eventually they cut his arms off.
Yeah,
and he's like, "Come back here, you coward!" Yeah, he's like, "You have no arms or legs," and he calls the other guy a coward because he's leaving him there. I think that's kind of like Clark. I mean, he's gonna fight to the death. I know. I understand that's being a little dramatic, but that's just what Vanderbilt and the football program mean to him. And there's not a lot of them out. There's not a lot of those people left. But he's also in has a feeling that he can change that thought. And even if he said it takes it, one fan at a time, he's bought in and he's willing to do it.
Yeah, and he needs some help with the fan and former player build. I mean, that's a whole other show entirely. I have some thoughts on that. That might be that might be a bye-week show.
Yeah, but that's kind of where I've stepped in, because we just happen to be, where our paths crossed at the right time and started an open dialogue, and it's just kind of where we are. So, and that's what I mean by Clark. He looks at everybody as somebody that can help, and he's not talking about just with their pockets.
Yeah, and to clarify, when I say he needs help with that, I think he's got a lot of good ideas. He just got a lot to bite off as a football coach, and they need some institutional help. But yeah, let's we've got about 20 minutes left. I've got a ton of questions in the mailbag, but before we go there, Will, I know you had a breakout player or two in mind for this season, so we'll talk about those, and maybe I'll even give you a pick or two.
Okay, well, I've tried from afar to, follow the daily press conferences. You and I have had conversations, whether it's Bleacher Report, the Tennessean, trying to just dig deep into everything that's been going on. And, one of the things to me that jumps out is Mike Wright is your quarterback. Obviously, the coaches feel like that their strength is in the running game, keeping the ball on the ground. Obviously going to throw to keep the defense off balance. And that's where I feel like, Patrick Smith is a guy at running back that I think that could have a huge year. I mean, I think we saw last year, and, he played in all 10 games, 82 attempts for 360 rushing yards, 16 receptions, that the guy has talent. he kind of reminds me of a human cannonball. And I think that that's a guy that if, again, the schemes are correct, the offensive line has improved, the receivers are doing a better job of blocking downfield. This is a guy I think that could have a big year. I also think that he is elusive, yet powerful. So I'm really looking forward to see what he does and how he's instituted into the offensive scheme that they, and again, something else I think that will help the offense is the continuity, because I was reading an article, one of the offensive linemen, and I forgot his name. He's a fifth-year senior. This is the first time that they've ever had the same offensive coordinator 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, they finally have some continuity on offense. This is something new for them. So I think, and that's another area where we could say, hey, that's a plus, but then that's where also the expectations now have risen on the offense because of that continuity and the same offensive coordinator, that you expect to see this offense improve by leaps and bounds. So there are expectations, maybe not from, the average fan standpoint, but I think from the coaching standpoint, from the players, they understand that. And I think that, here, game 1 against Hawaii, they're excited to show it.
This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing, it's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible. Yeah, the only place I would push back on that one, and I think Patrick Smith is a really good back. I think most years he would start at Vanderbilt. I think Ray Davis is going to be such a part of their identity. He's been so good in camp, maybe even their best player. Certainly, I think their best player on offense. So I think the running back situation is an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% about, Ray Davis being their best football player, period. Yeah. Okay? But at the same time, we understand, the physical pounding that these guys take.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not even talking about, let's say Ray Davis carries it 25 times in a game. Even the plays that he's not carrying it, there's physical altercations where he has to block. And if Patrick can step up, Ray can make the improvement over last year. Now you're talking about two backs where you could constantly run these guys in and out, and you can keep them fresh. But at the same time, because of their abilities to catch the ball out of the backfield, if you can put them in at the same time with different packages, then who do you focus on?
Yeah,
and that's something that this team has not had in a couple. They've had good running backs, but they've never had the ability, in my opinion, and, from what I've gone back and seen, to put two back there at the same time, where now the defense has to consider both guys, not just one.
Yeah. No, they're both very talented guys. And I think he's probably going to get 100 touches. Rocco Griffin will eat into that, but just because I think they're going to be a run-first team. I think they need to be a run-first team. And, Ray Davis got hurt last year, so... and it's going to take a pounding in other games. So I think that that's a good pick. It just, just want to nuance it for the fans a little bit that he won't be the starter, because the starter's really good too.
No, yeah, and the starters came out in the depth chart, and he's not the starter. Ray Davis is, and I know we have some other questions, but I wanted to throw something out there about Mike Wright. I know we can sit here and talk about Ken Seals being third on the depth chart, which I think everybody's really surprised by because A.J. Swan now is listed as the backup for this game going into Hawaii. But I think what's more important is we have to see improvement in Mike Wright.
Yeah.
I read an article to where, he was asked about where he feels like he's improved the best, and he answered accuracy. Now, not only yourself, but others that I've talked to that have watched practice, this is not coming from the coaching staff, but this is coming from others that have been at those open practices. They're not sure that they see much improvement, but we have to wait till you get into the game atmosphere where there's really now the pressure is on to see how he does and see his accuracy. But the interesting thing that I have read is, that other players refer to him as a galvanizing presence. When I read that and I heard that, I thought about a guy I played with in Avery Johnson in San Antonio. Avery Johnson, you're talking about a team now that has David Robinson, that has Tim Duncan, that has Sean Elliott. And Avery Johnson was our quarterback. He was our point guard. But Avery also knew he wasn't the best player on the team. Avery also knew he had a lot of deficiencies. But to make up for those deficiencies, he made up with it with basketball IQ, meaning that we knew as his teammates that he was competitive. When I say competitive, he challenged everybody. I mean, you're talking about in an 82-game season. Throughout that season in 99 when we won the championship, Avery got into a verbal or physical altercation with everybody on the team. Every single player at some point or another, whether it be me, Malik Rose, David, Tim, Sean, because he didn't feel like they were playing up to their abilities, or they weren't taking the right mental approach, or, they weren't taking things seriously. And I think that, Mike Wright needs to take a page out of that book. Whether he's having a great game, a good game, a bad game, whatever it may be, he's also the captain. And he is a guy that, has to be smarter than everybody else out there in the sense that he's got to assign, the blocking schemes. He's got to assign that to the lineman who then pass the word down the line. He's got to make sure that he reads the defense properly. He's got to invest the time prior to the game and watching so much film so that if he's having a bad game accuracy-wise, for whatever reason, just like a golfer, he shoots 62 on Friday, but then he steps on the course on Saturday and is just struggling to keep the ball in play. But he's got to find a way to get the ball in the hole, right? Mike Wright's got to find a way to have a positive impact on the game. And if he has to do that with his legs, then he has to do that with his legs, but also he can do that in other ways. Where Avery did the same thing, he knew all 5 positions on the floor. And if you screwed up, he would come to you and say, hey, you know that on this particular play, you're supposed to do A, B, and C. So the next time down the floor, we're going to run this play again, and I know you're going to get it right. Because if you get it right, the play doesn't break down, and then we score. Because if we run it right, it can't be stopped. So Mike Wright's got to kind of use that football IQ to where if he's having a bad game with his arm, that he finds other ways to help his team win. But also, he's got to continue to be that galvanizing presence to where he keeps everybody else engaged, keeps everybody else involved, and that they put themselves in a position, even if they don't start the game off well, that to where they have an opportunity to win as they enter the fourth quarter.
Will, are you ready for the mailbag?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right. That's a good thing because there's lots of questions here. Our mailbag is presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, please call Taylor or Russell. That number is 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Believe 22 wants your prediction for the Hawaii game.
Well, I honestly do believe that they're going to win this game. What makes me nervous is how they start. because of exactly what you said in regards to, I think they've had a really good camp, but now here we are the week before the game, and some of that doubt has started to creep into the fan base. And how much of that are the players actually hearing? Okay? You can try to ignore it all you want, but it's almost impossible to not see it, to not hear it. So can they put that behind them? And if they don't get off to a great start, can they, right the ship? And that's where I think the mental toughness of this team is really going to be tested in this game. That's one of the points we talked about at the beginning of this podcast about being able to handle adversity. But I just think when it's all said and done, Vanderbilt is the better team, and I think that they will find a way to win. I wish I could sit here and be confident with 7 points, 3 points, 10 points, whatever it is. But I think they find a way to win. Maybe they don't cover, but I don't care. It's just about winning and getting that right mindset heading into week 2.
Believe 22 also asks, how close is Ken Seals to graduating? With it looking like A.J. Swan will be the backup quarterback, I'm wondering if Ken may simply want to play the role of emergency quarterback for the 4-game maximum, which refers to if you play more than 4 games, you lose the red shirt, and either stop playing football altogether or utilize his eligibility somewhere after this season.
It's interesting. When this came out, the depth chart came out and I saw that, it actually made me think of myself a little bit, because I haven't talked to the coaches. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just speaking from experience as a former player, that I think this might be more of a motivational tool than anything. So you can sit here and say, hey, Mike Wright, A.J. Swan, Ken Seals, but I'm not so sure this isn't. I don't know what's happened at camp. I think we'll all agree at this moment, if you talk about you need to pass the ball, he's your most accurate quarterback. But maybe there's something more there than just this being about athletic ability. Maybe it's about, how he's approached camp. And I'll preface this, I don't know this for a fact. But there's just this seems odd, and it almost seems like it's more of a motivational aspect of, hey, get your ass in gear type thing. But I'm not 100% positive. Again, just going off my own experience of, dealing with Phil Jackson and my years in Chicago, when I thought I was actually playing very well. Then all of a sudden the Bulls up and traded Stacey King for Luke Longley. And then Phil Jackson pulled me in his office and said, okay, I know you're not going to like this, but we traded for Luke for a reason. We're going to start him for 20 games and see how it goes. And I was livid because I felt like I earned the starting spot. I felt like I deserved the starting spot. But yet, the one thing that I knew about Phil Jackson was he was always about, big, broad shoulders. He always was a big fan of Wes Unseld, who was a huge man, height and width. And I was not. I was 7 feet, but I was narrow, had narrow shoulders, but I was still 245. But Phil felt like we needed, more girth in the paint. And that's why they made the trade. Luke came in, started those 20 games. Guess what? I got my starting spot back. And I kind of feel like that it made me think about that immediately. And I'm just curious, again, don't know this for a fact, that this is more of a motivating factor than anything. Because it's tough being in Ken Seals' shoes. You feel like you've been demoted. So how do you respond? And maybe that's what Clark and the coaching staff's looking for. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Let's see how he responds. And does he fight back? Does he give in? Does he transfer? Does he become an enigma? I don't know. It's, this is part of what we talk about it, handling adversity, the emotions of being an athlete. This is something that we have to keep an eye on.
Okay, here come the hoops questions, starting with Foghorn. You had to anticipate that, right?
Yes, sir.
When you look at the men's hoops team, what gets you the most excited? What concerns you the most? And do you think Vanderbilt will use NIL collectives to aid in recruiting efforts? By the way, before you answer, I did reach out to Jason Burns, who heads Vanderbilt's collective, about coming on the podcast. I think he's agreeable to that. Not right now. They're still getting their stuff together. So I just wanted to let the audience know that we are going to try to have someone address the topics of Vanderbilt in its collective at some point, but the time apparently is not right at the moment. But anyway, with that, your answer to those hoops questions, please.
Yes, but a quick question. I did see the one where the Hooters signed a couple of the Vanderbilt offensive linemen.
Yep.
And I wonder, what are the requirements of that? Did they have to wear those little orange shorts underneath their Vanderbilt pads? Or, I don't know. I guess we'll have to do a little more research. But so, in regards to the question about basketball, I mean, I'm anticipating a much better season this year. And one of the things that honestly really excites me is the Pittsburgh game, because I all think we all know that, listen, the game was in Pittsburgh last year, but we all know when we talk about Pittsburgh, what comes to mind? Barry Goheen, Scott
or
Stroud,
Kevin Stallings,
1988, Kevin Stallings, but C.M. Newton, Nebraska. So NCAA tournament. So I think that's, that could be a stepping stone, but no. And I am excited about that game because I think we have some stuff that we can talk about later on down the road. But I think that, I don't want to say that Jerry's figured it out, but I think that he now truly understands how important, I'm not saying he did it initially, how important recruiting is, but just how much more important it is to, get guys to Vanderbilt than it is at other places, that are, because of the fact that, it's just a different type of player that wants to accept different challenges to come to Vanderbilt than other schools. And I'm not just talking about from an academic standpoint. I'm just talking about from, Vanderbilt is just a special place. And, you just have to be willing to accept different challenges. And it's not just about basketball at Vanderbilt. But, and I think Jerry has figured that out. I think that, the coaching staff has done a nice job with developing these guys as they've made improvement. I think that this trip to Paris will help them out significantly. And I'm not saying that they're going to the NCAA tournament or anything, but I truly believe and expect them to be much more competitive this year.
Okay, Brain13 asks, Lee Dort is a type of big man we don't usually land. What will you look from him this year? How important is it that he's behind two talented and very different centers in Quentin Malloy-Brown and Liam Robbins?
Well, I think the one thing that this team needs to do is put themselves in a position to where they own the paint. And I know that's a big term that they use in the NBA, but it doesn't change in college. They have to be able to protect the rim, and that's not something that they've been able to do a very good job of in years past. And what I mean by that is that you don't necessarily have to have a historical, well-known shot blocker. But what you do need is a big body that's willing to, and a player that's willing to sacrifice that big body. And I'm not talking about a guy that stands in there and takes a charge. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what you refer to maybe as a bruiser. He understands how and when to waste the foul. He understands positioning to alter shots, maybe not necessarily block shots, but also put the thought into opponents that if they turn the corner, if they look to try to get into the paint, somebody's going to be there. And also that relies on the guards as well to rotate properly when they do get beat and not give up. and cover the backside. So that's also a communication issue. But also on the offensive end, somebody that can generate second chance opportunities via offensive rebounds, keep the ball alive, but also somebody that not necessarily is a dominant back to the basket type player. I don't know if there's many of those guys exist anymore in college, but somebody that if you need a bucket inside the paint because shots aren't falling, you have that guy that I'm not saying can carry a team, but can get you a few points inside the paint when necessary.
Okay, the last one is directed at you personally. J2M says, who actually coined the term per dunk, and did you think you'd beat Pitt after you fouled out?
I'm not sure who came up with that term. I think that was actually somebody within the media, and I'm not sure exactly who that person was, because, the one thing that CM Newton despised and would never do was to put one player above the team. Now, he kind of got backed into a corner my senior year because guess what? I was the only senior on the team. So, it was rare to have one individual on the cover of the basketball magazine or whatever, but yet I was the only seniors, and the seniors were always on the cover. So that's kind of how it happened. But I'm not 100% sure where that term come from, but I really liked it. And to say I was devastated when I fouled out was an understatement, because I literally thought that my career at Vanderbilt was over, because it just, and the biggest problem with that play was I was kind of caught in between. I knew what my foul situation was, and I was, and that comes to the term when you think you're a step slow. And do I back up? But I knew I couldn't give up just an easy 2 points. So I tried to provide the proper defense without fouling, and it just didn't work. And as I was walking to the bench, I was dejected. I was trying to control my emotions because of everything I had been through, the highs and lows of my 5 years at, Vanderbilt, including the redshirt year. And CM Newton pulled me aside and said, "Hey, this game's not over." I don't know his exact words, but he claims that he told me that we were going to win the game, and I'm not 100% positive about that. But I do know that his words were very encouraging. I do remember him referring to it as "this game's not over." And, Barry Goheen and the guys made sure of that. And they saved me. And, unfortunately we lost the next game, but we do talk about, at least we lost to, the national championship and the Kansas Jayhawks and Danny Manning and the Miracles.
Yeah, that was quite a season.
And, again, I'll put it out there, the expectations of every single former basketball alumni out there is that they can and should be willing to invest the time, the money, and the effort to get back to that level. Because I think we all fully believe, as I shift gears for a moment, that basketball should be a program that at least makes the NCAA tournament 4 out of every 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, it's been a while since it's been at that point.
So there we have it, my friend.
There we have it. Well, I know you've got to run. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to us doing this again, and I guess hopefully next week.
All right, so I do want to close this podcast with this prediction. Okay? We all know that this team last year went 2-10 and didn't win a game in the SEC. But I'm making this prediction right now before they even played one game. Now, I am throwing a caveat in there. And the caveat is, if this team can stay healthy, they will win an SEC game this year.
I like it. They need one.
Yeah, and I know people may be like, "Oh, that's boy, whoopee-doo." But you got to understand how far backwards this Clark Lee had to take things to go forward. So, if we do win an SEC game, that's an improvement on last year. But I think that also will send a message to not only the fan base, but to possible recruits and, upcoming freshmen and sophomores that aren't playing that much, that this team and organization and athletic department is headed in the right direction.
Will, if folks want to follow you on social media, where do they do that?
I'm on Twitter at Will_Perdue32.
All right. Well, thanks for your time again today, and look forward to doing this again. 1 to 2 weeks, I guess, depending on your schedule, which I know is busy. We'll figure that out, but I know we'll do this again soon, and I look forward to it.
Well, Chris, I appreciate it. I enjoy doing it. I appreciate everybody that downloads and listens to the podcast, and continue to send questions into the mailbag.
All right. Thanks, Will. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.